How oft did they provoke him in the wilderness, and grieve him in the desert? Yeah, they turned back and tempted God, and limited the Holy One of Israel. They remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy, how he had wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Zoan, and had turned their rivers into blood, and their floods that they couldn't drink. He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. He gave also their increase unto the caterpillar, and their labor unto the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamore trees with frost. He gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to hot thunderbolts. He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath and indignation, and trouble, by sending evil angels among them. 5 charges are laid to Israel, which can often be applied to members of the one body, so called. They provoke God. They grieved God, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 30. They turned back, see 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 10. They tempted God, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 9. They limited God by their lack of faith, see Numbers chapter 13, verses 27 to 29, and Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. These sins came from a root sin mentioned in verse 42. They remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. For the Christian's part, it's this failure to fully appreciate salvation years after the transaction has taken place that causes the sins listed above. In the New Testament it's called, first, not giving God the glory, and second, not being thankful. Romans chapter 1, verse 21. For Israel this meant forgetting what took place in Egypt under Moses, verses 43 to 51. By sending evil angels among them, verse 49, every plague that came was a message from God to Pharaoh, and one of the meanings of the word angel is messenger, see Malachi chapter 3, verse 1. Angels are spirits, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 14, and the spirit, 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 21, comes to Ahab, and deceives him, 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 22. These spirits are angels, according to Job chapter 4, verses 15 to 17. In the Old Testament they appear to people, Judges chapter 6, verses 11 to 15, Numbers chapter 22, verses 31 to 35. You will note that angels are connected with the drying up of the Euphrates in Revelation chapter 9, verse 14, and with the plagues that hit nature, see Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. The plagues in Egypt are carried out by destroying angels who respond to Moses' uplifted rod. Abaddon, the death angel called the destroyer in Exodus chapter 12, verse 23, completes the anger, wrath, and indignation and trouble of verse 49. Undoubtedly, he was assisted by evil angels. He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to the pestilence, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength in the tabernacles of Ham, but made his own people to go forth like sheep, and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. And he led them on safely, so that they feared not, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. It's a pestilence that kills the firstborn, but it's a pestilence like the one that cleans out Sennacherib in one night, Isaiah chapter 37, verse 36. Observe that it's an angel who carries out this pestilence in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verses 14 to 15. In Amos, we are told that this pestilence is after the manner of Egypt, Amos chapter 4, verse 10. And in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 5, we learn that such a pestilence has instantaneous killing power. It destroys in a matter of minutes, not days. In the tabernacle of Ham ends all dispute about who Hamites are. Africa is the land of Ham, Psalm chapters 105, verse 23. If the Egyptians and Canaanites were half-breeds, you still cannot avoid the Libyans, Jeremiah chapter 46, verse 9, and the Ethiopians, Cushites, who live in Africa. Biblical fact that the descendants of Japheth are Europeans, the descendants of Sem are Orientals, and the descendants of Ham are Africans. See Psalm chapter 106, verse 22. Verses 52 and 53 are self-explanatory. And he brought them to the border of his sanctuary, even to this mountain, which his right hand had purchased. He cast out the heathen also before them, and divided them an inheritance by line, and made the tribes of Israel to dwell in their tents. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High, and kept not his testimonies, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow. For they provoked him to anger with their high places, and moved him to jealousy with their graven images. Note that God's right hand purchased Mount Zion, verse 54. Abraham offers his only begotten son, one of the greatest types of Jesus Christ in the entire Bible, Galatians chapter 3, verse 16, in the land of Moriah, not Mount Moriah. This place is Abraham's sacrifice, either on Gordon's Calvary or the spot revealed to David, 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 16. If in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen, Genesis chapter 22, verse 14, then the altar that Abraham built was either on Mount Calvary, which can be seen from Mount Zion, or it was on Mount Zion itself. If the writer who wrote Genesis chapter 22, verse 14 is Joshua, and Joshua is said to write in the book of the law, Joshua chapter 24, verse 26, and there is evidence of it, the mount of the Lord at that time could have been Mount Ephraim, for that is where the Ark of the Covenant was, and that is where Joshua was buried. Mount Zion can be seen from Mount Ephraim. Furthermore, the expression Mount of the Lord would have been used for Isaac's time, 1900 before Christ, unto the time of Moses, 1500 before Christ. For the place was called Jehovah Jireh, God will provide. No temple had to be there for it to be called that. Observe that in Exodus chapter 15, verse 17, a future sanctuary is prophesied on this mountain, 500 years before Solomon shows up. Note how the commentators above unwittingly chose established from Exodus chapter 15, verse 17, while rejecting the word purchased, which occurred right before it, Exodus chapter 15, verse 16. Asaph is speaking of Christ's death as a past transaction, exactly as Isaiah speaks of it in Isaiah chapter 53. Christ's death purchased the land area of this earth, Matthew chapter 13, verse 44, Romans chapter 8, verses 20 to 22. And the place of this earth that he chose to commemorate his death was the temple area that covered the threshing floor of Aruna, the Jebusite. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 18. It's still in business after the second advent, Ezekiel chapter 41 and until chapter 46. Christ purchased it. He purchased it when he shed his blood in the land of Moriah. The events of verse 55 takes place in Joshua. Once in the land they still rebel, verse 56. They have plans for rebellion even when Joshua is giving his farewell speech to the nation, Joshua chapter 24. For the reader will observe that they never do consent to the negative requirements for dedication. Joshua chapter 24 verses 23 to 24. Verse 58 is self explanatory. See 1st and 2nd Kings.